Good afternoon, Vince.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Coach Barker and Coach Gorman. So, good afternoon, everyone on the other end. Again, welcome back to Match Day. Vince Ganzberg, along with Coach Ian Barker and Coach Barry Gorman. This is part 2 of systems, the history of systems. If you missed this morning's presentation, no worries. We did record it. And Coach, if they ask me, can they get the slide deck from? Are you okay with me sending out the slide deck of this, like in a PDF, for a price, Coach Gorman?
Oh, I have no problem with it.
All right, very
it's
good.
all historically covered somewhere.
All right. Well, I tell you what, I'll go ahead and we're just going to pick up where we left off. And we left off with the wingless wonders. And Coach Barker, please feel free to chime in and make this more entertaining. So, all right, Coach, I think you can take controls from here.
Okay, we were just talking about England's World Cup winning team and how they played, and then also looking at how in different countries things developed slightly differently, and the Italians taking the more of the approach about the counter-attacking teams. And it should be remembered, of course, as we move into 1970, that the Italians were the defeated finalists to the great Brazilian team. So moving on, it's just for a minute to bear in mind that we had a lot of things with the 3-5-2 developing as well, and especially with the role of the sweeper back or libero. And as I mentioned earlier, this is the time period when we started to see soccer players becoming equivalent to rock stars, pop stars, and so on. So as players were identified by their numbers, and now we have squad numbers coming in for World Cup, players start to get identified by their position, by their number, and then they get identified as being the one who makes a position glamorous, if you like. We talked about in the early days, the old center half was the main peacock in the system. But now we have a lot of difference, and we saw that the Italians looking at the 3-5-2, other teams looking at it as well. And we've seen a bit of a comeback for the 3-5-2 in recent years, and we're looking at a lot of teams thinking about whether they're a 4-back system or a 3-back system or indeed a 5-back system, but a whole lot more flexibility. Moving along, and not to forget, of course, with the women's game, we saw a lot. Vince and I were talking about Anson Dorrance in the early days and how he would play a 3-4-3, and the US would get away with that because of the athleticism of their players. They had great athletes, so they weren't worried about being beaten in the back for speed. But as we see from these diagrams, times change, and if you don't change, you're going to be left behind. And there's an awful lot more of sophistication in the women's game, which is great to see. And you see a lot of stars coming forward in their game also. If we look at the development, and again, all these things now are showing that things are becoming more and more flexible. As we look at players, players are now being given roles, and the players are being assigned a role according to a number. So it's a little bit of a circle, if you like, going back to when numbering of shirts first came in. Now we're identifying a position by a number. You're going to play a number 6. You're going to play a number 8. and the players are being educated in terms of where does that player actually play. So depending on where you are, Latin America, South America, Eastern European, Western European, they were taking their formation that was best suited for their play or for the coach and developing it. So for example, if we take the 4-4-2, we show here a flat 4-4-2. There can be a diamond in the midfield. And again, as we said earlier on, how far does this player move to change it into a 4-3-3, etc. We had players like Beckenbauer really exciting people over the role of the libero, and we have other players coming through at different times that the fans start to identify with. We talked earlier on about how you say someone, what position do you play? And he says, I'm number 7, I'm a number 11. We're almost back to that now, aren't we?
Yeah.
I play a number 6, so people know where you are. I play as a number 10, people know where you are. And of course, the number 10, because of the highlight of Pelé and Messi and Maradona, people realize or recognize that this is a playmaker. But again, it could be a forward. As we said, in 1970, Pelé was playing more as a forward. We talked about the diamond formation, the 4-4-2. We talk about the 4-3-2-1. This is the famous Christmas tree formation that I think Terry Venables, Ian may remember this. Terry Venables seemed to be stuck with that formation to his name anyway. But more or less, as we said before, where this player starts to become more like the lone striker, and it's whether these players can get up and support. As we mentioned here, I mean, Angelotti used that to great success. But again, now you start to look at the quality of players that the coach has available. And it bears the question, do the players fit the system, or is the system fitting the players? Another system that became very popular via the French was the magic rectangle or magic square. And of course, we're talking about extremely talented players. And for that matter, you're talking about extremely innovative and coaches who are thinkers and who really looked at the game. But again, it's utilizing the strength of the individuals. And again, we should stress that now we're seeing a real switch towards more defenders than there are attackers. So as we said earlier, today numbers are used to assign players roles. Players may be asked to play the 6, the 8, as you can see here in this diagram. And mostly you'll see a lot of this system in Spain in La Liga.
Why do you think that is, if you don't mind?
I think we have to look at, Vince, a lot of stuff where weather is going to play an important part. I know that in the United States and in MLS, some of the foreign players that come over, they're going to look and they're going to say, you know, I'm playing in Toronto and it's cool. Then I have to play the next game in Houston and it's sticky and it's hot. Or I have to play Orlando City in Florida. And like for today, example, it's pushing 90 degrees.
Mm,
You're gonna play a lot differently than you would if you were playing in the north of England in December.
sure. Sure.
So I think there's a lot of adaptation there, and
Hmm.
we're seeing today with squad rotation and high systems or high formations are going to switch depending on the players that the teams are using. We're seeing the inverted wingers coming into
Yep.
play.
Yep.
And if a player is not versatile and he's not flexible, I'm not sure he's going to fit into the modern game.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
certainly when you look at Liverpool this season, it's tremendous. And they have two outside backs that get forward, and they're becoming very proficient in getting assists.
Hmm.
And you're seeing fullbacks ending up in the penalty box.
Right.
So it's all going to depend on what license they have and what role has been assigned to them. So today in the system, it's going to be more about the player's role, and it's going to be playing to his or her strength.
So, what advice would you give? People that on watching this webinar might be working with, for example, 9 and 10-year-olds that play 7-a-side. So, how does them learning how to play 7-a-side in a system, how does that impact them? So, for example, in Barcelona, the youth teams kind of mirror the professional team. As far as but is that more geared to you? In what your opinion is, a style, or is it more of a system, or both?
Uh, I think it's going to be down to the club's philosophy and what their culture is and what they're looking to try and get. I mean, you have to, I think all the top teams, if they're going to win, winning will cover a lot of stuff, obviously, a lot of the cracks. But at the end of the day, the fans, the culture, the history, the tradition of a club is going to
Mm-hmm.
be looking for entertainment.
Yeah.
And how a team plays getting to be promoted is going to be different than maybe how they have to play to stay in the top level. But if you're bringing players through your system, then you're looking to identify what their strengths and weaknesses are and where they may fit in to your system. If you're saying that we're a 4-4-2 club or we're a 3-5-2 club, then we're
Right.
looking to
Right.
identify players that are going to fit in. A lot
Yeah.
of times reserve teams are looking to develop players that will be able to step into the first team.
Right.
And
Right.
if you're a big club, you're going to be looking to develop from within to save that budget and having to go out and spend a fortune
Yeah.
to find that ready-made replacement.
Yeah.
And we've seen lots of examples in that in the professional game. In the
Right.
youth game, I think it's all about getting the players to play as many different positions as possible so that they understand them.
Yeah.
In the
Agree.
past, I've had teams where I've had a very good player, but I remember one guy that played for us at Penn State was very good, but he could only play in a 3-back system
Hmm.
because that's all he was exposed to growing up. And I think a good coach, especially at the younger levels, is going to have that flexibility. And
Yeah.
especially now that we've got kids playing in smaller numbers, we can get them to play. Like
Right.
the Brazilians went to the 4-2-4 early on, and then they developed that through to even into the 1970 World Cup. But they
Mm-hmm.
had the players that could play,
Right.
and you want to develop that soccer savvy in the players, and his mindset is going to be set that he can play first and foremost. Now, whether he's a good tackler, whether he's got the size to play as a center back, whether he's got the speed to play on the flank, all those things obviously the clubs will look at. But I hate to see where we had in this country years ago, they got a big kid and they said automatically he was in the back.
Yeah.
And no, I think our thinking is much more global now and
Yeah.
much more advanced, and we're saying, all right, realizing maturational levels, and a kid may grow 6 inches in a week, you know. So it's
It didn't hit me.
it's good. I think there's a much better environment for education and for coaching education, that people look beyond the short term.
Yeah.
And I think that's a crucial element when you're dealing with youth.
Yeah. Coach Barker?
So Barry, some of this would be inspired, I assume, by reading Jonathan Wilson, right? The Inverting the Pyramid book. Is that something
Yes.
you've got through?
Yep, I would thoroughly recommend that. There's an awful lot of good books out there. We were saying earlier, Rain, that people, I think to be a good coach, you have to do a lot of reading, and you have to do a lot of research as to what's gone before to fully understand systems and formations.
Yeah, it's Joe, one of our people on the podcast. Joe, the book is called Inverting the Pyramid by Jonathan Wilson. So it's Inverting the Pyramid by Jonathan Wilson. And then Lewis wrote in about under 8s and under 12s. I think, Lewis, what we're talking about here is that age, they need to learn how to play soccer, first of all. Then we worry about formations, and then we worry about systems. But I think when we're in that 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, let's make sure they've got the technical fundamentals, and we'll bring the tactics and certainly the formations in a little bit later.
Yep. No, I agree.
I think when you encourage kids to play, then they start to develop their soccer brain, as opposed to the rote learning and saying that this is what I want you to do.
Right.
And I hate it whenever somebody is labeled as a right back at 7, 8 years of age.
Yeah. Yep.
I
Agreed.
mean, in years ago in the ODP and even in the regional teams, we went so far one way to look so far in the future that I thought we were missing some players there and then that could bring a lot of benefit to the team at that moment, but it could also develop.
Right. Well, we got to, I think we're, a little bit over time, and I don't want to keep any of your time, but, oh yeah, let's look at this. This is quite the slide.
What we said in the first part was that it used to be a 4-year cycle whenever people started to look at systems. And if you go back through all the previous World Cup winners, you will see there was actually a lot of flexibility in their systems.
Yeah.
And it's so encouraging to see that whether it's male or female, we're now talking about a soccer player. And basically I love that, because you want to have a soccer player. I tell people that you want to look for skill first and foremost. Then we're looking at speed, and then we're looking at what's their soccer savvy, and then we're looking at, say, their strength and their size. And strength and size will go into positional stuff, but it's not a matter of being big and strong. It's a matter of, can you hold your own on the soccer field? Can we train these young players to become truly great soccer people? They play for the love of the game, and therefore they understand it. So basically today, coaches tend to think in terms of a 3 or 4 back system, or even a 5, with a crowded, flexible midfield. The old question, the old adage, does the system fit the players, or the players fit the system? And I think that's an age-old argument that's been going on since I first started playing. But in my early days, our coaches never talked about systems.
Right.
They just told me, you're playing here.
Yep.
And I didn't care. I didn't care as long as I got on, because in my day, I didn't have substitutes.
Well, I was just lucky to get on at first, and then, I just tried not to screw up after that. But No, what this has been, yeah, as what I was expecting, just outstanding, and hope people on the other end got something out of it. And then if again, you people on the other end watching, if you want the PDF version of this, I'm more than happy to send it to you, courtesy of Coach Barry Gorman, who again is a pillar in our organization. So, Coach Barker, I'll leave it with you, and then I do want to say what webinars we have on, on for tomorrow.
Yeah, so Barry, thank you very much. It was certainly worth part 1 and part 2, and we only gave you 30 minutes in what is normally a series of lectures at a course. It just occurs to me that, and I'm writing here to Lewis, anybody can list a whole bunch of numbers that hopefully add up to 11. So a formation is a formation. It's what we do to make it a system that I think is important. Mm-hmm. So, you can probably look at, say, Man City, and you can look at Liverpool. If we look at a couple of English examples, they both play essentially a 4-3-3, but they play them completely differently. So I always get worried when coaches simply say, I play 4-4-2, but they can't tell you why or how they do it. So from my perspective, the distinction between a formation as it becomes a system is an important one. I think it came out in this presentation.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And boy, I wish you could have just done it with cones again, Coach, because that was brilliant. But this was just as good.
That was a good group. That was a good group.
That was a good group,
and they were funny. and it was just to quickly, because Vince and I talked about this before. When we used the cones, we assigned people, and they had to move the cone, and it was really interesting as we came through the years and the systems changed. And then we would look at the coach who had the cone, and we would say, "Now, is this coach really the right player for this position?" And it was funny, and the coaches took it all in great stride. It was marvelous. But there's so much more. As Vince and I talked about, you could spend a week on a series of lectures, like Ian said.
Yeah.
But thanks, guys. Pleasure to see you too. Stay safe, and
yes, you as well.
Distance.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes. And by the way, those that are curious as to tomorrow we have at noon Eastern time, Lori Lindsay, former U.S. women's national team player. And then at 4:00 Eastern time, we have Ryan Needs, who is currently with Sheffield Wednesday, and he's going to talk about set pieces. So really looking forward to those two presentations. So thank you all very much. And again, Coach Gorman, thank you as always, first class. And thanks, Coach Barker. Thank you.
Take care, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.